Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we are going to take a deep dive into, well, authentic leadership. We've got this really fantastic article by Eva Stenby. She's a leadership expert, and she's got some really thought-provoking ideas about,
Yeah.
what authentic leadership really means and how. Maybe just claiming to be an authentic leader might not be the best approach. So buckle up, because we're about to explore how to become a truly authentic leader.
It's funny because so many people talk about authenticity these days, but Stenby really nails it when he says that authentic leadership isn't a label you give yourself. It's a feeling that other people experience when they're around you.
Yeah, it's like that old saying, you can't judge a book by its cover.
Yeah.
You could say you're an authentic leader, but do your actions back it up? Do people actually feel that authenticity radiating from you? That's what Stenby is getting at, right?
Exactly. She argues that. Real authenticity comes from the impact you have on others, not just good intentions. And she really challenges you to think about your ambition as a leader, but not in the typical climb the corporate ladder sense. She asks some pretty insightful questions like, what kind of leader brings out the best in you? When you think about leaders you've admired, what qualities made them so effective? I think that's a powerful place to start.
It's almost like holding up a mirror to yourself, isn't it? Like, what kind of energy do I bring to the table? How do I want people to feel when I'm leading them? It's not about ego. It's about impact.
Right. And a big part of that impact comes from self-awareness. You can't lead others effectively if you don't truly understand yourself. And this is where Stenby brings up this idea of...
Raw material.
Okay, raw material. Now, when I first read that, I thought, break that down for me. What exactly does she mean by that? She's talking about the importance of gathering feedback from the people around you, not just the you're doing great kind of feedback, but the real nitty-gritty stuff, the feedback that might be a little uncomfortable to hear, but is ultimately the most valuable because it helps you understand how your leadership is truly perceived.
Ooh. I've been the receiving end of that kind of feedback, and it's not always easy to hear, but I can see how it would be crucial for growth.
It is. It can be tough, but Stenby compares it to emotional archaeology, like you're digging down to uncover the deeper layers of yourself, the motivations and assumptions that drive your behavior, and sometimes you uncover things you might not want to see.
So it's about getting a 360-degree view of yourself as a leader.
Exactly. And using that information to become more self-aware and ultimately more effective. Now, this ties into something else Stenby mentions, the idea that we all have multiple personalities. Multiple personalities. Now, hold on a minute. I'm not sure I have that many. No, not in the clinical sense. What she means is that we all have different facets of ourselves that come forward depending on the situation.
Oh, okay. That makes more sense. Like, I'm definitely a different person at work than I am when I'm hanging out with my friends.
Exactly. Yeah. And Stenby argues that understanding these different facets, these different personalities, if you will, can help us become better leaders.
Okay. I'm intrigued. So how do we actually do that? How do we uncover these different sides of ourselves and learn to use them effectively?
Well, Stenby points to a framework developed by Richard Boyatzis called intentional change theory. It's a 5-step process that helps you bridge the gap between your ideal self, the leader you aspire to be, and your real self. The one who sometimes hits the snooze button one too many times.
I think we all know that real self pretty well. But seriously, this intentional change theory sounds fascinating. Can we break down those 5 steps? What's step 1?
The first step is about defining your ideal self, the leader you want to become. Think about those admirable leaders you mentioned earlier. What qualities did they possess? What impact did they have on others?
So it's about envisioning the best possible version of yourself as a leader.
Precisely. And once you have a clear picture of your ideal self, the next step is to take a good hard look at your real self.
Okay. Time for some honest self-reflection. This is where that emotional archaeology might come in handy, right?
Exactly. Gathering feedback from others is crucial in this step. It's about getting an honest assessment of your strengths and weaknesses, your blind spots, and areas for growth.
So you're saying we need to be willing to face the music, even if it's not always a pleasant melody.
Absolutely. And once you've got a handle on both your ideal and real selves, you move on to the third step, gap analysis. This is where you compare the two and identify the discrepancies between where you are now and where you want to be.
Okay, so we've defined our ideal self. We've taken a look at our real self, and we've identified the gap between the two. What's next? Where do we go from here?
This is where it gets exciting, because now we're moving from analysis to action.
Okay, so what's the 4th step in this intentional change theory?
Step 4 is all about experimentation and practice. This is where you start to close the gap between your ideal and real self by trying out new behaviors, new ways of thinking, and seeing what works.
It's like a laboratory for leadership. You're experimenting with different approaches and observing the results.
Exactly. Stenby gives this great example of a leader who struggled with listening because they were afraid of appearing incompetent. So as an experiment, they started intentionally asking more questions and focusing on really hearing what their team members had to say.
That's a great example, and I bet it took a lot of courage for that leader to step outside their comfort zone and try something new.
It definitely did. But the results were incredible. By letting go of the need to have all the answers, this leader fostered a much more collaborative and innovative environment. And guess what? They ended up being perceived as much more competent because they were empowering their team instead of micromanaging them.
That's amazing. It shows that. Sometimes the biggest obstacle to authentic leadership is our own fear and insecurity.
Absolutely. And that's why the fifth and final step in intentional change theory is so important: supportive relationships.
The power of teamwork. So it's not just about going it alone on this journey of becoming a more authentic leader.
Not at all. Stenby emphasizes the importance of surrounding yourself with a strong, trusting leadership group, people who will support you, challenge you, and hold you accountable along the way.
It's like having a team of authenticity buddies,
Yeah.
right? People you can bounce ideas off of, share your struggles with,
Yeah.
and celebrate your successes with.
Exactly. And this is where vulnerability comes in. When you have that safe space to be open and honest with each other, that's when real growth happens.
So it's not about pretending to have it all figured out. It's about being real, even when it's messy.
Precisely. Stenby talks about creating a culture of authenticity where everyone feels empowered to bring their whole selves to work.
This is making me think about times. I've been part of teams where there was that sense of psychological safety. It's amazing how much more creative and productive you can be when you feel like you can be yourself, flaws and all.
It's a game changer because when people feel safe to speak their minds and share their ideas, that's when true innovation happens.
Okay, so we've walked through this 5-step process of intentional change theory, but let's bring it back to our listener for a second. Let's say you're listening to this and thinking, all right, this is all great in theory, but how do I actually put this into practice in my own life?
Well, first of all, congratulations for taking this first step. Even just being curious about authentic leadership is a huge step in the right direction.
Right. You're already on the journey.
Exactly. And as for putting it into practice, well, that's where those insightful questions Stenby poses come in.
You mean those questions about the kind of leader you want to be?
Yeah.
And the impact you want to have?
Yes. Those questions are gold. They force you to get really clear about your values and aspirations. And once you have that clarity, you can start making intentional choices that align with your vision.
It's like having a compass.
Yeah.
To guide you on your leadership journey.
And remember, it's a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
There will be bumps along the way, moments of self-doubt and times when you fall short of your ideal. But that's okay. It's all part of the process.
I love that. It takes the pressure off, right? It's not about being perfect. It's about striving to be better, to be more aligned with your values and your vision.
Exactly. And it's about embracing the messiness of it all. Because authentic leadership isn't about being flawless. It's about being real.
This making me think about those leaders I admire for their authenticity. They're not perfect, but they're genuine and they're always striving to grow.
That's a great observation, and that's what makes them so inspiring, right? Because it shows us that authentic leadership is possible, even for us mere mortals.
Stenby also talked about the importance of gathering feedback as part of this journey, but how do we actually go about doing this emotional archaeology she mentioned? It can be a little intimidating to ask for that kind of honest feedback.
It can be, but it's so worth it. And Stenby suggests starting by asking people very specific questions. For example, instead of just asking, how am I doing? Try asking, what did I do that brought out the best in you? Or what did I do that made you feel frustrated or unheard?
Those are great questions. They're so much more specific and actionable than just a general, how am I doing?
Right. And they really encourage people to give you concrete examples, which can be incredibly helpful for identifying patterns in your behavior.
She also talked about the importance of understanding our multiple personalities. Can you unpack that a bit more? How does that tie into authentic leadership?
Sure. Remember how we were talking about how we all have different facets of ourselves that come forward depending on the situation? Well, Stenby argues that. Understanding these different facets can help us become more adaptable and effective leaders.
So it's like having a team of inner advisors each with their own strengths and weaknesses.
Exactly. And the key is learning how to harness the strengths of each of these personalities while also mitigating their weaknesses.
So it's not about trying to be one kind of leader all the time. It's about being flexible and adaptable, using the right personality for the right situation.
Precisely. And it's about recognizing that we're all complex individuals with a range of emotions and motivations, and that's okay. In fact, it's what makes us human.
This is making me think about how often we try to fit ourselves into these neat little boxes. Especially in the workplace, we feel like we have to present this perfect, polished version of ourselves. But maybe that's not what authentic leadership is about at all.
I think you're onto something. Maybe authentic leadership is about embracing our imperfections, our contradictions, our full humanness.
Stenby also emphasized the importance of experiment and practice when it comes to developing authentic leadership. But what does that look like in practice? Give us some concrete examples.
Well, let's say you tend to interrupt people in meetings. That's something you might have uncovered during your emotional archaeology phase. So as an experiment, you might make a conscious effort to listen more intently and only speak when you have something truly valuable to add.
So it's about being more mindful of your actions and making small adjustments over time.
Exactly. And it's about being patient with yourself. Change doesn't happen overnight. It takes time and effort.
I really appreciate how Stenby emphasizes the role of supportive relationships in this journey. She talks about the power of building a strong leadership group where everyone feels comfortable being vulnerable and open with each other.
Absolutely. Having a safe space to share your struggles and triumphs is essential for growth. It's about creating a culture of trust and support, where everyone feels empowered to be their best selves.
This makes me think about the importance of psychological safety in the workplace. When people feel safe to speak up and share their ideas, without fear of judgment or retribution, that's when magic happens.
Yes. When people feel safe to take risks and be their authentic selves, that's when true innovation can happen.
So it sounds like authentic leadership isn't just good for individuals, it's good for organizations as a whole.
Absolutely. When leaders are authentic, it creates a ripple effect throughout the organization. People are more engaged, more productive, and usually more likely to go the extra mile.
This has been such an insightful deep dive. We've covered so much ground. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
If we connect all of this back to the bigger picture, I think the key takeaway is that authentic leadership is a journey, not a destination. It's a continuous process of self-discovery, growth, and connection. And it's a journey worth taking.
I couldn't agree more. It really is. It's about embracing the journey and all its twists and turns.
And remember, it's not about trying to be someone you're not. It's about becoming the best version of yourself.
What does this all mean for you listening out there who's thinking, okay, this is all great, but how do I actually become a more authentic leader?
Well, Stenby leaves us with a really powerful thought. Think about a leader you admire for their authenticity. What qualities do they embody? How can you cultivate those qualities in yourself?
That's such a great question to reflect on. And like you were saying before, it's not about copying someone else. It's about finding inspiration and then figuring out what authenticity looks like for you.
Exactly. Authenticity is deeply personal. It's about being true to yourself and letting that shine through in your leadership.
Well said. This has been an incredible deep dive into authentic leadership. Big thanks to Eva Stenby for providing such rich material for our discussion. And to you, dear listener, for joining us on this journey. Remember, becoming a more authentic leader is a process, and it's one worth undertaking.
Keep learning, keep growing, and keep leading authentically.
Until next time, keep diving deep.